Blacktricity, Got Kush TV's exclusive pre-Kwanzaa showcase is now available for you to watch absolutely free. In conjunction with Ghana, the On The Return series, we have brought the African diaspora experience directly to you. To watch this monumental event absolutely free, simply register for membership at gotkushtv.com and you will receive access to Blacktricity as well as more exclusive content, including Reggie Rockstone, Yusufu Jallo, VVN, Malaku Selassie, Daddy Makes Dough, Tods, King Wiz, Tubada, Ras Ashiba, Mama Sia, Brother Leader Bandaka, Israel, Sister Moots, Harley Marie, Yema Yasan Kofa, Goldflow, and a special Voyage to Motherland panel discussion. All this and more, hosted by Nat Nye and Stella B. Register now at gotkushtv.com. Black Lives Matter, Black Power, Reparations, featuring Esther Stanford Jose, Leo Muhammad, and Jendai Serwa. 3 the hard way in conversation about the connectivity and differences between these 3 movement building concepts and how we as a people move forward towards Black liberation and Pan-African nation building. To watch this powerful and insightful breakdown, simply register now at gotkushtv.com to view this and more exclusive membership content. You can watch this event absolutely free. Register now at gotkushtv.com. Gotkush TV, we put the power in Black media. How to boost your immune system in the COVID-19 era. An illustrious panel of health professionals ready to guide you in maintaining optimum wellness in the midst of the global pandemic. Featuring Stephen Sali of the Mariandina Foundation, Ikong of How to Eat to Live, Leah Salmon, the Naturally You Coach, and Kensu Ayim Hotep of the Naturally Wholistic Wellness Group. To watch these powerful and life-affirming presentations, simply register at gotkushtv.com for this and even more exclusive content. You can watch this event through Gotkush TV Premium. Gotkush TV, championing the wellness of our community.
Quarantine.
The Woman of Power Summit, a monumental event dedicated to profiling the work of African women around the world, past, present and future, featuring Affiong El Affiong, Ronoku Rashidi, the Goddess Neith Knight, Tony Warner, Ari Ma'at and Celine Ekigwe. To watch the Woman of Power Summit, simply register at gotkushtv.com for this and even more exclusive content. Gotkush TV, we put the power in Black media.
Quarantine Convos. Enjoy weekly discussions with people from around the world assisting us in dealing with this normal, mentally, spiritually and physically. We feature nutritionists, psychologists, therapists, personal trainers, home educators, legal experts and more, bringing you all the information and inspiration you need. Check out Quarantine Convos every Thursday from 7 p.m. live on Gotkush TV.
1 2 1 2. All right, kings and queens, you're inside the Gotkush TV family. Let me bring through my co-host system. 1 second, system. I'm gonna bring you through right now. All right, greetings, system.
Greetings.
All right, kings and queens, we are in his house. It's Quarantine Convos, your weekly discussion show live on Gotkush TV with myself, Shakara, and the one and only Sister Mota. We've got an extra special show for you today, kings and queens. Yes, a very, very, very extremely important topic, family, but I'm going to get into that in a second. Just to let you know that we would encourage you to like up the video as you come through, you know what I'm saying, and share it far and wide, kings and queens, because liking the video and sharing it increases the profile of this thing, you know what I'm saying, in the universal digital space, kings and queens. We encourage you to check out our website, gotkushtv.com, and also sign up to our mailing list, you know what I'm saying, subscribe, support, hit that support tab, you know what I'm saying, if you want to become a supporter of Gotkush TV. And now you can get membership where you can view exclusive content, exclusive shows, exclusive events, exclusive interviews, kings and queens, on gotkushtv.com. I want you to check all of that out. Check all of that out, yeah? And we will be updating you for all developments in the future to come. Want to let you know that our special guest today is Tierny Sheree of Afrikan Esq TV, and also We Charge Colonialism. She has released a new book entitled Fostering False Identity, the Child Welfare System's Design of Social Control of the Black Family. Oh my Lord, that is a deep title. As you know, if you were listening last week, our focus, our theme running through this season of Quarantine Convos will be about health and wellness. And we know that health and wellness includes the family and in many ways begins, with the family. So we're going to be getting into that topic. Our guest will be joining us a bit later on in the show. In the first half of the show, I'm going to be interacting with my co-host, Sister Mut, because, Sister Mut, is like one of them people that, like when we're talking about what she do and what she are going with, it can go on for a long conversation. So one conversation won't do. So we're going to have to continue our conversation from last week to this week. So that's going to be the first part of our show. And then we're going to be joined by Sister Tierney, all being well, in the second half of our show. We're going to get into the topic of fostering false identity and the child welfare system. My Lord. Sister Mo, how are you doing?
I'm very good. Thank you so much. Thank you. Glad to be back with yourselves. And I wanted to start these quarantine convos slightly differently. I'm going to bring a little bit of my flavor in it, right? And I wanted to start our quarantine convos with an African proverb. Yeah, I think it's important that we recognize the times that we're in, how often African proverbs can actually at this time be a very useful, in our healing and our wisdom. It's drawing, rising up on the shoulders of our ancestors, our good elders, and drawing down for the wisdom of our good ancestors. So I would like to start off with this. And the reason why I chose this one, and this is for our guest actually, and it applies to everyone, but particularly our guest with what she is about to share with us tonight. And I found a lovely one. So I'll just read it to you. And it says, one who causes others misfortune also teaches them wisdom. And when she shares about her book, I'll hold my hands up. I tried to buy her book. I was like, I'm buying it immediately. When I found out that we were going to go and do this, I was like, buying her book. And then I pressed the wrong button and then pressed Kindle. It's now gone onto my children's Kindle. Not a good look, not a good look.
I hear that.
And I'm a books person. I need the touch.
It's called a book. Yeah, that's what it was.
Come on, it's like food, right? So, and I want to study it. I want to be able to write notes in it. I want to highlight it. I want to get into the book. Books are to be read, not to be worshipped. Yes. So I'd like to get into that. Each week I'd like to, when we have our guests on, I'd like to bring a proverb, an African proverb, to the space and just ground ourselves and center ourselves inside of that, because the times we're in it's a powerful time, but also it's difficult for a lot of people at the same time. So I don't want to be insensitive to anyone either at the same time. So I also want to
just get, I want you to expand on the proverb that you have shared with us today. Delving at it, going at the thing, and bring out the wisdom. That why did it appeal to you, and so on and so forth.
Well, for sure. Look, her this lady's book, Tierney, her book is Fostering False Identity: the Child Welfare System's Design of Social Control of the Black Family. Now, if anybody knows a bit about my work and how restoring the Black family is part of my heart seat work. So I recognize that what she's about to share tonight, with her wealth of knowledge, and the background and her learning and her education inside of this is very important for us. And we have to understand that, yes, there is misfortune in what she has had to present tonight. She's going to be able to present, she has to present something tonight to do with our misfortune. And at the same time, we can draw wisdom from that. And that's what this has done for her. And when I look at this piece here, is that's what it's done. What it's done is allowed her to draw from that, what she's identified in terms of the misfortune, and around cultural disparities. And then she's in a position now to draw from that, and we're going to get some of that tonight. So I'm really keen to get
definitely, my sister. Well, I can expand upon that a little bit, and say the book is in 3 parts, and the final part consists of 1 chapter, which is the creation of a child welfare system for African children, and so effectively you've picked the right quote, or the right proverb, should I say, because it's exactly that wisdom that she's drawing from all of this harm, for the final chapter to be about creation, and I'm looking forward to getting into that conversation with her a little bit later on. So stay tuned, kings and queens. Tierny Sheree will be with us in the second half of the show, where we can get in to fostering forced identity, but also the recreation, the development, and the fostering of true identity. System what so we give thanks. Well, you had more to say. I apologize. I interrupted
we'll keep this going. That's right. No, but I do want to shout out. I want to shout out to this sister. I only just found out she was a doula yesterday, and I want to hail up this sister. I tuned in late last night, really late, to Sonetta TV, and the sister Nepal. She's a doula. Rise up, sis. Doing a fantastic job. She's co-hosting with Sonetta. Give thanks. Rise.
Well, we may have to get her on Quarantine Convos at some point.
Maybe.
Have a doula edition, I mean? I know a couple of other doulas myself, so we might have to invite like 5 doulas on the panel.
All right,
session, what I'm saying? Let's see that go. Okay. Yes. All right, family. So last week, you would have heard us speaking to Sister Mut, and we got into her work here as a doula, and as an relational evolution expert, guide. What's the correct terminology?
Relational, as we have relationships.
Yes, relational evolution. Yes. Coach. There we go. That's the one.
That's the one.
Yeah, coach. Coach. All right, cool. So we got into those aspects, but Sister Mut also said that she's a free birther. Now, this is actually a link, because obviously, creation of family begins with the birthing process, right? And so you're a free birther. What does that mean? What on earth is a free birther?
Well, a free birther is someone who chooses to have their babies with no midwife present by choice. So my 2 last ones are free births, but it didn't start like that. And I think it's important, as a disclaimer, it's important that not everybody's going to do it. Not everybody also is. It takes training of the mind, to get yourself into that state, and also know your body very, very, very well. And so I didn't start off like that. So I'm a mother to 3 sons.
Right.
And one of the things is I was quite, I was very careful as a young person. I never had any situations where it popped up. I was pregnant, that kind of thing. Surprise pregnancies at that time. However, I moved into my consciousness, and I also, rid my body of all sorts of toxins, including at the time contraception, and so I'm cleansing my body and cleansing my womb at the time as well, and then I had a surprise pregnancy.
As it happens, it happens. You know what I mean?
No. Listen, that's the thing about. I can't speak for anyone else's story. I can only speak for mine. But my story in its own self is unique, and at the same time, it's real. People do. It goes like that. My job in my field is very important for women to understand that no matter what the circumstances, you got this. So I didn't start off like that. When I actually found out I was pregnant, I had this kind of like, as a young person, I had a strong desire to be a mother. Like, that was my thing. Like, if I die tomorrow, I'm a mother, I'm complete, that kind of thing. So, and then reality kicked in. The reality of, oh my gosh, now at this time, I'm going through 2 sets of emotions. So I'm having a kind of textbook pregnancy. Like, nothing's wrong, everything's fine, it's low risk. But my mental state, my mind state, I'm absolutely petrified. it's considered maybe a strain of what they call tocophobia, when women are actually petrified of childbirth. I got to the point where I couldn't even watch a video. You know, them times there when I was having children, yeah, it was go to the library and get VHS.
Right.
And so I know
everyone listening right now. So I'll have you notice this, everyone listening right now is took out their calculator to just, you know what I'm saying, calculate which part of the, you know, you know what I'm saying, the space-time continuum this is taking part in. But yeah, go ahead.
21 years ago. How about that?
All right, cool.
Do the math. Yeah, so 21 years ago, I'm absolutely petrified. I'm having this experience where I'm like, all right, you know what? I'm happy to be pregnant.
Yes.
But I'm scared of childbirth. Like the two can't work together. They can't coincide together. You can't be yay and a nay at the same time, because the subconscious mind listens to that. Yeah.
Yes.
So at the time, it was very much like, okay, well, how am I going to deal with this? And I had a fantastic midwife. In fact, she was so amazing, African midwife. She was lovely. And I told her all the things I was doing for my health and well-being. And she was like, you know what, you're doing all the right things. However, if you have the baby on the particular day that the baby is due, yeah, I'm not going to say his birth date, but I'll tell you this, and this is no word of a lie. My son was born 40 weeks to conception. Yeah. That's like, I don't know how, out of how many millions. Yeah. That's, you know, most children are not born on the day from conception. Yeah. I knew what day and I knew what day. Yeah. And it was 40 weeks on the day. Right. And so that was, for me, was like, you know, I wanted him to come on that day. I was clear. She said, if he comes on that day, I won't be able to be there. I said, okay, you know, but I'm also still dealing with the fear. She's giving me props. Yeah. So she's like, yeah, you know, boosting me up, like, you're going to be fine. But my head's not telling me this. Yeah. So I'm crying when I'm seeing these videos. Yeah. I'm absolutely like, I can't watch them. Yeah. And I get to a point where I have to, by the time I have my 20-week scan, I'm at a point where I have to make a choice. I have to make a choice between fear. At this point, I'm textbook and I'm low risk and I want a home birth. And my consciousness is coming in. I'm meditating. I'm speaking to the baby. I'm eating better. I'm doing all the right things for my pregnancy to be a good pregnancy then, right? But I'm still got this fear. So I have to make a decision or a choice at this point. And at this point, I say, I know what time it is. Yeah, if I want to have a home birth, I'm going to have to give something up, and I'm actually going to have to give up fear. Yeah. So I fast forward now. I've now trained myself. I've got to a point where I've actually trained my mind. I'm doing all the work on myself and reading everything. I'm an encyclopedia at this point. When you're my first pregnancy, I become like an encyclopedia around pregnancy, like at that point, right? And then I get to my fast forward. We get to my labor, and I'm in my relationship at that time. I'm in a relationship at the time, and at that point when I'm in labor, I tell him I'm calm. I'm you know, I go into labor and I tell him, look, I'll wake you when it's kind of time. You know, when I feel like there's a little bit of you know, pressure, and hold on, sorry, wait a minute.
It's all right. Oh, okay. All right. We've lost system. We're going to be bringing through Tierny Sheree shortly, Kings and Queens. So do stay tuned. Yeah, she's in the building earlier than expected. That's a blessing. You know what I'm saying? We give thanks. You know what I'm saying? We give thanks. I'm just waiting for Sister Mutt to get back with us. And we're going to conclude with Sister Mutt's free birthing journey. So yeah, do stay true, Kings and Queens. Yeah. All right.
I was gone.
What happened there, Sister Mutt? You got there was a glitch in the matrix.
Don't worry.
You know you're the one in it. Like, you have to be careful how you move in the matrix, you know, because
I can't even touch it. Okay.
You know what I'm saying, you know. Yeah, like, but we got Sister Tierney in the back here, so we're just gonna conclude because I'm sure people are intrigued, yeah, about what it means to be a free birther. So let's just go to quiet links, yeah, because children is what we're dealing with today. So go through, sis, go through.
100%. Yeah. So at this point now, I've had my first birth. I think this is important at this point, just to sort of give you a little backstory. So I'm in labor. Now you're supposed to be 10 centimeters when the baby comes. Yeah. I'm now at 8 centimeters when the midwife comes. And she kind of breaks the bond a little, says, look, you know what, don't hold her hand, she might break your hand, all this kind of thing, breaks the bond. So that again comes up in the kind of work I do. And when I was having at this point, I'm in labor and I'm not experiencing any pain. I'm actually experiencing a pain-free birth first time. So I'm overwhelmed by how this is. 8 centimeters, she says you can push now, which was wrong for her to say. I could have actually hemorrhaged. And she
for the record, just so I can it's 10 centimeters, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm just making sure that that
from there,
my knowledge of the birthing process is up to scratch. You know what I mean? Good thanks. All right, cool. Go ahead.
You can look floor, ladies. Pelvic floor. And and so I felt why I say that is why I went on to free birth is because I felt a little bit robbed. By the time she came and told me what she told me, I actually felt, hold on a minute, I'm feeling a little bit robbed here. I'm feeling like, okay, I could have done it myself. Fast forward another 10 years, I'm already a doula. I choose at this point to have my middle one at home. I have a team of people with me, like I call it a village birth, men drumming in the kitchen, women chanting, and everybody, I train everybody to be my child, my pain relief, if you like, and last birth, 6 years ago, I deliver my second one is born into his father's hands. And by the time I get to my last one, I'm like, well, hold on a minute. The first one was born in my midwife's hands. The second one was born in his father's hands, but I'm not the first child on my own, my own hands on my own child. So I deliver him in water, 3 hours, and it's a beautiful birth. So that's the short version.
Well, I'm gonna do this, because I'm sure enough people are wondering how you managed to do that. And for the last few years, there's been some videos, because some women tend to film this process. So there's been a number of videos going around of women just giving birth to their own children in their living room and them kind of things there. And women, and people respond with amazement. So people, if you want a little of the urban goddess magic, for touch you, feel free, to email, the urban goddess, at urbangoddessevolution@gmail.com, and she can guide you, She not only does this herself, but she's able to guide you through these processes, as a couple, as men and women. And we discussed that last week because the modern day, the mainstream establishment don't know how to deal with fathers when it comes to the birthing process. Well, Sister Mut is not one such person. You know what I'm saying? She's a doula. And so the whole family is very important to the process. As she said, she had man drumming in the kitchen, you know what I'm saying? And, ritual agua in the front room. And so it's a communal process. And so we understand that as a people, kings and queens,
So what I will just say is, if you email me and you want to get in touch, you can. I'm also at on Insta Urban Goddess Evolution, and if you quote Got Kush TV, we can have a free consultation, a half an hour consultation for free if you name Got Kush TV. All right.
Yes, family. So you know what I'm saying? All those who are nation building and in the process of nation building and creating more Black boys and girls for our African nation in the making, do get in contact with those such as Sister Mut, you know what I'm saying, for the expertise, because the birthing, the child rearing process begins from conception. And so we understand that. And it's good that we have brothers and sisters in our community to guide us through that process. Kings and queens, I'm gonna just drop a short intermission and we'll be back on the other side with our very special guest. Stay tuned. Blacktricity, Got Kush TV's exclusive free Kwanzaa showcase is now available for you to watch absolutely free. In conjunction with Ghana, the On The Return series, we have brought the African diaspora experience directly to you. To watch this monumental event absolutely free, simply register for membership at gotkushtv.com and you will receive access to Blacktricity as well as more exclusive content, including Reggie Rockstone, Yusufu Jallo, VVN, Malachi Selassie, Daddy Makes Dough, Tods, King Wiz, Tubada, Ras Ashiba, Mama Sia, Brother Leader Bandaka, Israel, Sister Moot, Carla Marie, Yemaya Sankofa, Goldflow, and a special Voyage to Motherland panel discussion. All this and more, hosted by Nat Nai and Stella B. Register now at gotkushtv.com. Live and direct. This is Got Kush TV, Kings and Queens. You are live. Quarantine Convos every Thursday at 7 p.m. We are here, and our theme, for this season of Quarantine Convos is health and wellness in every dimension of human experience and human interaction, Kings and Queens. And today we are blessed for the second time on Quarantine Convos to be hosting the one and only Tierny Sheree. But she's glowing, with a special glow, right? You know what I'm saying? This time around. You know why? You know why, Kings and Queens? Because now what's different between the last time and this time is that now, Tierny Sheree is a first-time published author of her own book, Kings and Queens. Welcome, Sister Tierney. Welcome.
Thank you for having me back. Thank you.
We appreciate it. And let me introduce you formally to my co-host, Sister Mut.
Hi, it's nice to meet you.
Greetings.
Right, before I get into this, you can't see my t-shirt good right about now, but let me show you who my t-shirt is right about now, That is Mama Namzamo Madikizela Winnie Mandela, The reason, why I'm wearing this t-shirt for this particular show, because we are here speaking about Sister Tierney's new book, which is called Fostering Forced Identity, the Child Welfare System's Design of Social Control of the Black Family. And many of us know Mama Winnie Mandela for the fact that she was a anti-apartheid fighter. Really, she was an African liberation freedom fighter in Azania, South Africa. But her actual day job, was as a social worker, right? And so she was seeking to remedy a lot of the social inadequacies that were inherent, within the system, of so-called apartheid in South Africa. And so through that work as a social worker, working with families, is where she begins her activism. And so I just thought it was an appropriate t-shirt to wear, especially because our guest is somebody who's most certainly walks in the footsteps of our great mama. Yes, I know I'm putting you in big shoes, my sister, but you're doing big.
Don't do that.
And it's deserved, you know what I'm saying? It's deserved. Right, so we're going to get into this, sis, Firstly, thank you for joining us. We truly appreciate it. And just for those who never saw you the first time, just introduce yourself so that people can get to know who you are.
So the name is Tierny Sheree. Essentially, the way I became in contact with Shakara is that I have a YouTube channel called Afrikan Esq TV, and that's where I discover different Pan-Africanist topics. And other than that, I also am an attorney by profession. I am currently a civil rights attorney. Previously, I was a child welfare attorney. And in addition, I am the chair for We Trust Colonialism. We are an anti-colonial organization, really seeking to raise awareness, not just of colonialism, but of internal colonialism that exists in the United States and such societies like that. So those are my current roles at this moment.
Giving facts, my sister. In relation to, we have to get into a lot of your activism work, probably at another point. I don't want to over bombard the people them, But before we get into it, you did notify me earlier on today about some events that are taking place on the weekend, that we want to let people know about in relation to this whole period of corona and isolation. Let people them know what going, please, sis.
Yeah, so there's a program that's happening this weekend. It's called the Get Out of Cuba's Way program. It is being hosted by Brother Obi Egbona Jr. And the purpose of the program is to raise funds for the Cuban professionals who actually go into the continent of Africa and train African doctors. A lot of people are probably aware that there's a real issue of African doctors whenever you are someone of having credentials, basically going into Europe and starting their trades there, coming here to America, going places that might give them more financial incentives rather than staying in a continent. But the result is that you have essentially the continent with their best talents being robbed from them. And so the idea behind it is that since Cuba has already on its own initiative started going into Africa and really training a lot of the doctors, that this is something that we should be able to fund instead of expecting a country that is small and very much facing the big giant imperialist of the United States, expecting that country to fit the bill, is kind of unreasonable. And of course, this will also lead to an opportunity for expansion of new types of trainings and resources that can happen in the medical profession on a continent. And so that's the purpose of the program. I know I sent you a link. I don't have it on me.
No, I've got the link here.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not getting the full, but I'm going to post the link anyway in the chat, so people can. And the reason why this is important, family, is because I mean, there's a lot of talk right about now about to vaccine or not to vaccine. That is the question. And what is interesting to me is that a lot of the people in our community that are pro-vaccine and are accusing people of being scientifically illiterate if they're vaccine hesitant are also seem to be politically illiterate, in the sense of the fact that by all indications from what I've studied, and I don't remember the figures off the top of my head, but Cuba has a better record of addressing this situation than most other countries, and they have a medical system that is overly capable, of addressing this system to the point whereby they are actually able to provide help for others. But you're never going to hear that in nations like Britain and America because they have an anti-Cuba stance. So their understanding of the geopolitics trumps their understanding of the medical needs, of people at any particular point in time. And so it's very important that we remain aware of that. So I'm going to post the link to that event in the chat right about now, so that people can get more information, and we'll share the flyer a little bit later on as well. All right. So we've profiled that. Big up to brother Obi Egbuna Jr. For those who are not aware, he is the son of the father of Black Power movement in the UK. We have to understand that. So Obi Egbuna Jr. is a part of African history in the UK because his father is the father of the Black Power movement in the UK. Obi Egbuna Sr., a man that was born in Nigeria and lived in the UK. And when he was here, he was organizing with people like Amy Ashwood Garvey, Claudia Jones, you know what I'm saying, and others, kings and queens. And so, you know what I mean? Yeah, man. Big up the lineage. And big up the fact that the lineage, that the fruit, is doing the work, of, you know what I'm saying, the father at this point as well. All right, family. We've got through that. The link for the event is in the chat, and we'll come back to that a little bit later on. So, Sister Tierny Sheree, fostering false identity, the child welfare system's design of social control of the Black family. That title for some people is gonna sound like a whole heap of, you know what I'm saying, words. So give meaning to these words. What does that title actually mean?
So fostering false identity, I chose that title because a major issue that I confront inside of the book is the assimilation campaign done against African people in the United States by the different institutions that exist. And in this case, I'm talking about the child welfare system and other social institutions. And so there's a real intent to take children from their families whenever their families are deemed a threat to the system, cause family separation, and try to put those children with people who they feel like could assimilate them into white culture. And for Black people, we know many of us obviously are not even going to be assimilated, but it's more so any type of way to, I would say, kill the threat from the child. So that's what the fostering false identity part comes from. But the child welfare system's design of social control, this is how the child welfare system was created. This is not something that just happened in recent times. Literally, when the system was formed, it was done so with the intent of enforcing social control. And right now, what we have is in America is a situation where African children are disproportionately represented in the child welfare system. And so if we're not connecting these dots, that this is a system that was put together for social control, and overwhelmingly our children are being targeted by this system, then we're not going to be able to confront this thing that has devastated many African people.
Beautiful. And I'm gonna because I was able to, I haven't finished because you've done a lot, but I want to just begin because you start the book with a narrative, and it brilliantly lays the foundation for what you're dealing with in the book, because, and it's important, the prologue is called The Story of Donnie, and really what it does, it gives us a very personal perspective before we get into the geopolitical social analysis, of this reality. And I just think that it was a beautiful way to begin the book, even though very painful. I want to know from you, is Donnie and his family, is that a true story, or was that what they call a historical fiction or a metaphor of reality in that sense?
Well, are you okay with me killing the end for you? So it's the story about my father.
No spoilers.
My father, he was a foster child. And the funny thing is, as I said, I was a child welfare attorney for 3 years. And for a long time, I never really asked them exactly what happened to him when he was in foster care.
Right.
And so when I actually asked them, I'm like, wow, it really had to make me evaluate a lot of the things that the system pushes. And I already knew something was wrong in the system. You kind of get the feeling when you're coming in that there's definitely an agenda that's going on. But the whole premise that the child is going to be safer in foster care, I think my dad's story just completely throws it out the window. In his case, he was completely abused. He was mistreated, not just physically, but psychologically. And that really does challenge, how many children are we putting in harm's way because of this agenda from the system?
Well, since I can tell you this, you do have a future in creative writing should you choose to take it up, because the story, and I say, yeah, seriously, I say that because I know that you were trying to bring the narrative with feeling, whilst also not try to make it a novel. So I got the fact that you're trying to get the information across. But if you wanted to do that a little bit more, you could. I just want to put that out there. And I'm making the listeners and the viewers know that the book is multifaceted in how it approaches this particular topic, for us to get a proper real sense. It's very African, the way that it's very personal, it's very interpersonal, it's very communal how you've laid it out, first of all, for us, I'm going to get into some of the issues in a second, but let me just hand over to Sister Mott to see if you've got a question before I go any further.
Yeah, I mean, I really loved, I hadn't got a chance to read it in its fullness, and it came via Kindle instead of hard copy for me, onto my children. So I'm going, and I had a really lovely structure of how I was going to do it, but no.
Physical copies, mate. That's what we like.
Yeah, I do.
Physical books, that's what we like.
Yeah,
long live.
And I'll still buy the books. Trust me, I love to study. So I'm going to buy it twice. But because I noticed in the book you and I was looking at your another interview that you've done with Got Kush, and you were talking about I saw inside of there the importance of other, you don't just take on Black families, you bring up the conversation around Native Americans, which nobody really talks about at all. They're just obsolete to most people. So I thought that was a really important area, and I wanted to get a sense of why, I know it's part of your work, but why there's quite a concentration there. Tell me about that. Tell us about what are the disparities then between a Black child and a Native American child in these circumstances?
So the Native American struggle is very important to understanding the struggle of Africans in America, because it's probably the most similar struggle that we have. In their case, they had a land, they had a civilization, they had a culture, and Europeans came and wiped it out. And they didn't have a choice. They were forced into this system. They were forced into being on reservations. And it's very similar to us, who didn't have a choice. We didn't come to America by choice. We came on slave ships. We came and we had to give up our culture. We had to give up our civilization, and we had to become a part of this whole American scheme. So when you look at the two groups who really didn't have a say, and not to say that other groups who come willingly, that the same dynamics can also be reproduced with them. It certainly can, but when you look at the agenda of the government towards two groups of people who were never supposed to be free citizens inside of the United States, who never came here by their own will, now trying to grapple for freedom and self-determination, well, there's a very different response that you're going to get. And so for Native Americans, originally the response from the government for them as to how to deal with this threat was extermination. We know obviously that most of their civilizations have been wiped out. Somewhat by warfare, somewhat by diseases, very intentional efforts to target them. But at a certain point, you had this philanthropist class come up and say that, well, that's not the right way to go about it. So let's think of a more humane way to deal with this Native American problem. And they came up with assimilation. And what you see with what they did with the Native Americans is they basically had all these government programs. The point of these programs was to strip them of their culture, strip them of their languages, strip their children of their Native American identity, and to transform them into being white. This same system was later applied to us. You know, originally when we were enslaved, we were not thought to be people who wanted to be brought into the American system. We were only supposed to be slave labor. And whenever you had all, I think 40 million Africans free at one time, 40 million Africans free at one time, the government has to grapple with what are you going to do with that issue? And the issue that the government decided to do was to basically segregate Africans completely. But although that was the original intent, eventually it ended up changing to being an intent that the government was going to essentially wipe out our culture instead of wiping us out physically. So it's very similar struggles. And I think for comparative purposes, we have to understand how this same program was operated on Native Americans to understand how it's being done on us today.
And can I just ask a further question to probe into that one? Did you find in your research and your study that there was a difference in terms of, was it the exact same structure? Were the results the same?
It was more so, I think it came at different times. That's one thing. So obviously earlier on in American history, it's okay to be more explicit with your racism. It's okay to say outwardly, we're going to assimilate you. So there was something called the Indian boarding schools. The blatant reason for these boarding schools was they are going to assimilate these children to being white. Now, would that work with Black kids in the 1950s? No, you can't, necessarily use the same verbiage whenever you're trying to achieve the same agenda. But by the time that the child welfare system did start having Black children come in, because originally Black children were segregated from the child welfare system, but whenever they started going after the Black family, then by that time, a lot of the language had changed, but the agenda hadn't changed because they still had a large population that they were trying to control.
Got it.
Interesting. I was thinking while you were saying, is that nowadays there's a large narrative that the indigenous peoples of the Americas were not conscripted into being white. They were conscripted into being Negro and African. But that's another story for another time. We're not going to go into that right about now. I want to ask you though, so to flesh out this thing a little bit more, yeah, and then I want to touch on one thing that I think is unique about this particular book, right? But just give our viewers a general overview. And by the way, I want to say both my parents were social workers. My mom still is. My dad used to be, and he used to work in fostering and adoption. And so a lot of what Sister Tierney is outlining mirrors the African experience in the UK very much, yeah. And another day we're going to go into that in terms of the history of that movement. But just outline for us some of the give us a basic picture of the reality facing African families with regards to welfare in the United States of America.
So basic picture, in the 90s, there were a number of laws that came out of the crack cocaine epidemic and a time where things were very racialized, and Democrats and Republicans together were very outward that this is something that we're trying to control what's going on in these urban environments. And so what happened was a number of laws were enacted. The ones pertaining to child welfare, I would say one not pertaining to child welfare, but there was a welfare, financial welfare, that is, bill that was passed that very much stripped social welfare programs for Black families. Right following that, you have two laws pertaining to child welfare. You have the Multi-Ethnic Placement Acts, which essentially said that caseworkers in the United States are barred from considering a child's race whenever they're placing them with a family. Mm-hmm. And this is something that we can see the problem with. Mm-hmm. And then the other act that followed right after this, essentially saying that now you can't even purposely place a Black child with a Black family. Right after that, there was a law passed called ASFA, the Adoption and Safe Families Act. That law said that essentially you have 15 consecutive months to get your act together once your child is in foster care. Otherwise, the state is mandated to file for termination of parental rights. And they could always say, we don't think we should file for termination of parental rights, but it's very rare that they actually do that. So you can kind of see what gets laid for the groundwork today. When you look at child welfare today, Black parents who obviously are facing a number of social barriers that are going to put them inside of a situation where you're just going to be more in contact with the child welfare system. Not only are children being taken, but they have a very short time to do whatever the white judicial system tells them is enough for them to actually gain their children back. And when they don't, their parental rights are terminated. Of course, whenever Black children go into foster care, a lot of times they're put in danger's way. The entire foster care experience is just traumatic from beginning to end, from the second the child is taken from their parent. But there's a number of added layers that go on. You could be abused by other children in foster care. You could be abused by your foster parents. There's so many different things that children deal with, to the point where foster children who come out of the system versus those who remain with their families, their outcomes are just so vastly different. So our children are being traumatized, and then a lot of them actually, even if their parental rights are terminated, a lot of them don't even get adopted. So they become what you call legal orphans. They technically don't have a parent. Their biological parent, they no longer have rights, and the state has not found them a foster parent. And so it's a very dire situation when you look at the social implications of African children being left completely isolated from those communities who they're supposed to be connected to.
Right, interesting. Kings and Queens, you're listening to Tierny Sheree of Afrikan Esq TV and We Charge Colonialism. She has recently released a book entitled Fostering False Identity, the child welfare system's design of social control of the Black family. If you want to get the book, as I'm sure you will by the time this session concludes, the link for getting the book is in the description to this video. Yeah, so make sure you check that out and support the thing, whether it's your physical copy that me and Sister Mook prefer, or if you're modern day now, you got digital and you like the Kindle thing, you know what I'm saying? I listened to an audio book for the first time, like all the way through today, So yeah, it was yesterday, sorry, it was interesting. 12 hours. Yeah, mad. But yeah, I'm getting used to it. You know what I mean? All right, Kings and Queens, I want to get into, by the way, we're going to be opening up the lines here for you to interact with Sister Tierney soon. So like up the video and share it far and wide, because a lot of us in this country, in the UK, are experiencing similar things when it comes to child services, especially in the midst of all of this lockdown foolishness that I go on right about now. Sis, I want to touch on though what I consider to be a unique aspect of this book. With all of that you just outlined in terms of the laws and so on, more often than not, all right, trying to remedy this for most people relies upon popular narratives that keep us locked in the system. Yeah. And the uniqueness of the book that you've written is that you have actively steered away from that analysis. In other words, this is not a book, for example, about Black youth and education, whereby the solution is get more Black teachers in the school. Yeah. Or the Black police is brutalizing us. We need more Black police officers. That's not the vibe of this book. And I want to just read a quote that kind of gives expression to what I've just said. Sister Tierney says, so when Black scholars talk about disproportionality in the child welfare system, discussing it in such a way that assumes the appropriateness of Black inclusion in the system is natural, so long as the treatment of Blacks in this system is comparable to the treatment of the whites. Thus, little thought is given as to whether African children should be in the system at all. We ignore the fact that the child welfare system in America has been at its foundation a system of social domination, either out of convenience or ignorance. And she goes on to explain what self-determination actually means. And as I said before the sister came on, the last chapter is about the creation, yes, of an African welfare system. So my sister, with that long lead up here, please just explain to us here why it was important for you to situate this book on the principle of self-determination as opposed to integration or assimilation.
Well, to me, obviously as a Pan-Africanist, Black nationalist, I cherish my people. I do not want to lose my culture. I do not want to lose my people. So for me personally, I could never see myself taking an integrationist stance on something, because that essentially assumes that our people should join into the white dominated capitalist system a system that not only oppresses us, has oppressed us in the past, but continues to oppress us today, not just domestically, but also globally. So the idea of advocating for that type of system obviously is always going to be foreign to me. But in the case of the child welfare system, the thing that we have to understand is that a lot of our people have this self-hatred of ourselves, that we always assume that if white people created something, if there's a system that they say is good for them, that it's going to be good for us. And that's just not the case. And the child welfare system is literally the best example of that, because African people at one time, particularly from organization, the National Urban League, were thinking that, oh, we want our children to be included in this system. So they actually pushed Black children into the child welfare system, thinking that that's a way to partake inside of American white society. Right. What they could not have foreseen at the time, unfortunately, is that this same system was going to be weaponized against their communities. But this is the sickness that exists inside of us because of racism, because we have been taught to self-deprecate and not want to be African, want to be white. You know, these are the results that exist.
I'm gonna ask you one more thing and then hand over to Sister Mut. What if, we lived in a world in which there were no disparities, between the white child and the Black child, as far as the child welfare system is concerned? That every benefit that it offers the white child, it offers the Black child, that, if there are any deficits, it affects the white child as much as it affects the Black child and whatever. Is there still, in that reality, this parallel universe that I've just created, right? Even in that reality, is there still a need for a welfare system by African people for African people?
Yes. One, I am not of the belief that under any circumstances that any institution that is created and controlled by white people is going to do anything for Black people. And this is a basic human right that we should understand. You have a right to self-determination. Why would you want someone else? Let's say they were completely well-meaning. Let's say that they're going to do right by you. Why would you want someone else to control your political destiny? That's the sick thing with us, is that it's just been so normalized. We feel like we cannot have a destiny without white people being in control. So when we say African child welfare, we're saying, number one, that we have already cared for our children historically. Prior to being brought into the child welfare system, African children did have a system, not African families did have a system of kinship care where you cared for each other. It didn't mean necessarily that you were blood related. It just meant that you were a shared people with a communal interest. These are the things that we got from Africa, of course, but these are the things that actually worked for us. This is when you sing Black families together. This is where you're seeing Black children being safe. This is where you're seeing us being able to step up and take care of ourselves. When those systems got broken down, that's where you're seeing a whole result that basically is something that's just repeated in every single institution in America that doesn't service us. And that is of Black people being completely attacked and targeted by these systems. So in your alternate reality, I would say that, first of all, we have to, out of a people who have a love of self, we have to do for ourselves. This is something that every other group understands. For some reason, it just goes above our heads. And beside that, any system that is created, because the child welfare system was not created for us, it's created to socially control originally immigrant white people from the outset, and it was about regulating poverty. So these are the types of things that I think as a people we should try to distance ourselves from across the board.
Giving thanks, my sister. Family, you're speaking to Tierny Sheree. I'm going to be open at the line soon, Before we do so, I'm going to hand over to Sister Mut. But please, whilst you're here, like out the video and share far and wide. I'm sure you can appreciate that Sister Tierney is a sister in our global African community whose voice is worthy of being heard, So share out the video, share it to your family and friends. Trust me, I'm listening to the sister, and a lot of what she's saying relates to things that are happening in my family right now. I'm not joking. So we give thanks, for those who are able to do this work from this perspective, because we know that our people are often given big money, to do this work, to do this research from the government perspective, and to meet government ends. And so we give thanks, for those who expend their own time and resources to do this work. Sister Mut?
Yeah, I just want to second that. It takes bravery and a lot of courage to do the kind of work that you're doing and go into the detail that you're going into. I am going to really kind of like get a chance to enjoy it, like food when I get into it. But I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned a little bit earlier about anti-colonialism, but you also in your book, you mention the impact. You talk about child welfare for whites, and I wondered how it was different. I mean, for anybody who doesn't know, yeah, I think it's important for, you know, people who are hearing it, some of this for the first time or anything like this for the first time, really, and the solutions that you bring to the conversation. I think I'd be interested, you know, like you talked about assimilation. So you spoke about how they put our children into these environments to almost, you know, colonialize them. Yeah. And, you know, I suppose the question on some people's lips might be, do they do the same with black families, put white children into black families to assimilate them? Yeah. Does that
not too often. I mean, there's always like one story that comes on the internet is circulated. You hear about a black family adopting a white child, and it gets to be like a sensational headline. But those instances are far and few, honestly. So,
but going towards that, I mean, what I want to get a sense of, look, you know, and I'm going to be angel's advocate here because I'm very much about how our people are, but I know that people do mix, and these things happen, yeah. And so at the same time, people make the choices that they make, and I think it's important to know that, again, it goes back to what's culturally appropriate and not appropriate. And I just wonder, you know, how we can, you know, we need to be able to harmonize. We need to be able to get back to a particular state of mind as a community, yeah, without being considered racist at the same time, yeah. But at the same time, wanting to get a sense of, okay, if we're dealing with anti-colonialism, that's it will be considered quite a strong word formation, yeah. But at the same time, it's necessary, yeah. So I want to kind of get a sense, maybe you could, I know that's an area that you were talking about right at the beginning, and I'd be interested in the solutions that you have around that, and, you know, what that means to us, anti-colonialism, because so many people are in different spaces, religiously, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. So what does, if you know, for everyone here who has not really heard that, some people have heard the term, some people, it might be their first time, so let's not assume. So I'm just saying, what does anti-colonialism look like to you, for us, on a global scale?
Decolonization to me looks like us understanding that colonization never stopped, first of all. And when we come to that revelation, then I think we'll start to be more intentional about what things we prioritize and what things that we don't. So for example, the Black Lives Matter movement, obviously, we're all seeing people react to police killings. We're seeing people who are so shocked and abhorred that these things are happening. If you understand that the system never stopped, the system of slavery, the system of colonialism never ceased, then I think your response to that is more measured. Yes, of course you mourn. Yes, of course you do whatever you can to protect yourself, but you are never of the impression that you're inside of a system where you're safe. That's the deception that our people have. We think that we get to live a middle-class lifestyle. We think that we get to get a nice job and go out in the suburbs and the police are just want to leave us alone. That is a deception that the system has taught us. But if we can recognize that, no, that's not the case, that these systems, they might look different, they might feel different, but they're very much intact and they're created to produce the same results, then that has us identifying the cause instead of dealing with symptoms. So decolonization, what is the biggest thing that's driving colonization of Africans internationally? It's capitalism, mostly Western capitalism, although we see other groups also partaking. But these are the systems that are intact after the decolonization of Africa. These are the systems that are still intact after the decolonization of the Caribbean. These are things that are still intact. So this means that we have to address these economic relationships, these businesses that get to hide behind corporate veils, these NGOs, these white supremacist international institutions, all the ways that colonialism morphed into being something today. That's what we have to do.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think it's important. I think what you say is important. it's about structures for that, you know, and, you know, it's about how we can heal from that. Like going forward, you know, 20 years from now, we don't want to hear this story. Your story in reality, a bit like as a doula, our role exists simply, a lot of it comes down to having a lack of extended family is why people choose a role like that, or somebody like myself. Our roles in that sense shouldn't exist. You shouldn't have had to write it. You understand what I'm saying? You had to write it, you had to identify it, and you had to, and I think, you know, I'd like to ask you a question, and this is for my children then. Yeah. You know, funny enough, my eldest is very much into studying social policy things, right? So I'm sure this will be a great read. But I'm interested in, you know, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, what do you think, you know, our children can learn? You know, what can our children put in place? So let's say 40, 50 years from now, we're not here. Yeah. What can our children put in place knowing that they've read a book like yours?
Well, we have to go back to what worked, you know, because there's a big history that gets wiped away from our discourse. The thing that I really advocate as far as dealing with social welfare institutions, particularly inside of Western countries, such as the US or the UK, is really going back to these things like mutual aid. We have to take care of our own people. We have to formulate ways to self-care. We have to really have a strong sense of African identity and understand that our culture has taught us survival. Survival is not being an individual trying to fight against a system that is preying on that type of mindset. Instead, survival is being a communal people who understands that it's not just you, but it's the whole community. If we go back to that, then I think you're going to see a lot of things change. A lot of people are talking about the Fred Hampton movie right now. We know that the Black Panther Party was very much instrumental in having a lot of mutual aid projects, whether it was the sickle cell clinic that they had, the free breakfast program. They were able to care for their own communities in such a way that they embarrassed the United States government, which basically copycatted all these types of programs as a way to thwart the Black Power movement. And we could say they were successful because most people don't even realize that the free breakfast that we have inside of schools was a copycat of the Black Panther Party. So these are the things that we have always relied on. These are the things that have always worked. And there's, like I said, I don't think there's ever going to be a time where an institution, a social system that is controlled by white people, and that Black people are going to be treated right inside of that system. So it's up to us to organize among ourselves and try to meet our own needs.
Kings and Queens, we're speaking to Tierny Sheree, author of the new, great and illuminating book, Fostering Forced Identity, the Child Welfare System's Design of Social Control of the Black Family. If you would like to get the book either in digital or physical form, you can find the link for that in the description below. And also, the link to join us live on the chat is in the chat feature right about now. You can either type your questions or click that link and come through and interact with myself, Sister Mut, and Tierny Sheree. And I also just want to highlight this particular book right here. Yeah, it's called Kindezi. Yeah, the Congo Art of Babysitting. It's by an elder, now ancestor, called Baba Kim Wadende Kia Bonseki Fukiao, and it's really about indigenous Bakongo child rearing systems, communal orders. And when you read it, you get to understand that if you studied the Ma'afa, our enslavement to any significant degree, you will realize that a lot of those techniques we held on to during that enslavement process. Bear in mind that throughout slavery, the best kept secret about the enslavement process is the extent to which we kept families together. Yes, our family structures were destroyed, and we had to create new family structures to be able to bring up these children and rear them and prepare them for the environment of the plantation and the big house and so on and so forth. And so we had various social structures, even on the plantation, for managing that reality. And so it just came into my head when Sister Tierney was speaking in terms of us developing things for ourselves and knowing about what works. What works goes back to our indigenous cultures, but it wasn't completely lost either. We have some of it, right with us right about now, kings and queens. So yes, the link is in the chat if you want to come through or ask your question. Big up to Naledi in the place to be. Naledi is one of the members of the Decipher family, kings and queens. Check out Decipher on Got Kush TV right about now. And Naledi is one of the stars of the show. Give thanks for joining us, my sister. I wanted to go to another excerpt from this book. Yeah, I've got a few here. I'm trying to decide which one to go to. There's a lot going on, yeah, with the things that you have highlighted and brought to the forefront here. All right, let's go to this one. So, and if I'm not mistaken, this is taken from chapter 1. I kind of copied and pasted it, yeah. But it says some might see these dynamics, yeah, talking about the dynamics of basically inducting us into the child welfare system as necessary evils to prevent harm to children. This viewpoint simply ignores the historical relationships of African children and their families to the government of the United States, a government that has more than once conspired against the health and well-being of the Black community. Analysis of this historical persecution raises the issue of whether it's really the parents from whom children need protection, or whether, in actuality, the children need protection from the state. This book will argue the latter and seek to establish that the United States government and its practices of child welfare pose a credible risk to African children and African people in America as a whole. Now, Sister Tierny Sheree, that sounds like, yeah, you're letting the Black community off the hook. Yeah, you're letting Watkins parents, yeah, and dysfunctional parenting off the hook. Yeah, you are blaming the system, Tierny Sheree, yeah, for what the Black community should be taking responsibility for. Why are you always blaming the white man? Yeah, does the Black community do nothing wrong, Tierny Sheree? Yeah, like, is there nothing wrong going on in the Black community that needs to be fixed by these institutions of society?
Listen, I say in the book, I'm not even of the mindset. A lot of people will argue that the reason why African children are disproportionately represented in the child welfare system because they say the social workers are just racist and they're just putting things on these parents that they didn't do. I'm not even going to say that there's not a higher maltreatment rate inside the Black community. I believe there is, because when you have a traumatized people, you're going to have the exhibition of trauma. One of the quickest ways that you see that manifest is by hurting those who are closest to you. So by all means, I'm very aware that there is a high rate of a higher, I don't want to make it seem like that's the biggest, like a higher rate of abuse inside of the Black community when compared to the white community. But at the same time, we have to be clear that why are these parents doing that? They're doing that because they've been victimized by the system. And that system is not poised to protect their children as a result. That system is only poised to further victimize those children. And that's what we see repeatedly happening. So the question I was really bringing up is the whole idea that the government can take your children. That comes from something called the parens patriae doctrine, meaning that the government is essentially the parent of the state. So as our parent, the government can step in and take certain roles in order to protect society. And this is a very well-held legal doctrine. And the manifestation of this is different things where you see the government step in to regulate families. Well, what gives the government that right, number one? But number two, what qualifies them to basically be the moral arbitrator when our whole existence started inside of this country as being an enslaved people by this government? So what qualifies them to now be the one to step in and make our family safe? I would say that the only one who's qualified inside of our history to make our family safe is ourselves. And so there is a real issue that exists. There is a real issue, like I said, of maltreatment, but the only ones who are properly positioned to deal with that issue are African people.
Most definitely. As you say that, I reminded, like I said, my parents were both social workers, and I know that over here in the 1980s there was a very big issue about the same race placement adoptions, yeah, and a group of Black social workers actually got together and did research on the children that were being adopted by these white families and what they were suffering, and they were basically a whole heap of trauma. And they were reporting things like trying to scratch off their skin, you know what I'm saying, self-harm, to do any of their black features, you know, an over propensity to want to be white, and other things. And so because of that work, by organized Africans but working within the institution, they were able to get this law passed in terms of same race placement adoption. But since then, that time, it's been made increasingly difficult for black families to adopt children. A lot of black families are finding it difficult to adopt children. And then recently they tried to repeal this law, right, to make it open again to anybody to just adopt black children. And a sister by the name of Marlene Ellis, who was also a part of the care system in the UK, has been fighting against that law for a number of different reasons. I'm just dropping that in there to show people that when we talk about the African diaspora and what we experience, when it's not a fairy tale, right? You know what I'm saying? People often think this is some Pan-African utopian dream. No, there are so many linkages, right, between us, you know, across the world and what we experience, so family. So it's very important for us to know that. And like I said, another day we'll go into history in the UK. The link is in the chat. And if you have a question for Tierny Sheree, please feel free to ask it and we'll get it through to her. I'm going to read another section from this book and I'll hand back over to Sister Mort. I'm sure she's got something more to tell you. What's it called? You say, sis, touching on the point that you just made, this solution to one dysfunctional family dynamic is a conceivable means to an end. The end being the safety, stability, and well-being of the child. But what of the more prevalent happenstance that occurs before a child is removed? That is, the parent may be financially unable to afford childcare and therefore leaves their children unattended. The home, and that happens. That happens. I went to school with people that their mum don't come home until 10 o'clock in the evening when they come home from school because they're nurses in hospitals, right? Just what I'm saying. And that's that. The home may lack basic necessities such as food, clothing, or toiletries, or the parents may struggle with illicit substance abuse. Even for the parent who practices excessive corporal punishment due to the stress of raising children in unpredictable circumstances. Does the cause of the maltreatment not matter? What if those parents struggle with trauma passed down from their parents who also raised their children in unpredictable circumstances? Does removing the child really deal with the root of the problem, particularly when the root of the problem is a manifestation of poverty? Is the child welfare system built to eradicate poverty or simply make poverty more palpable to American social standards? The answers to these questions are not difficult to uncover. And that was a long quote, but I thought it was important because the questions that you ask, in that paragraph are extremely important. So in brief, and you probably just done this already, but that just tap into that for us, in terms of the answers to all of those questions. And I get the point that you're getting to. We have to get to the root causes of the thing. But just in terms of uncovering the answers, what is it?
When we talk about social control, we have to understand that the United States created a problem, and rather than deal with the problem when it comes to African people, which it never does, it tries to put on a solution that allows the problem to continue to exist, but make it less apparent that it's happening. So for the instance of child maltreatment, like we said, which can be a plethora of things, but let's say the worst example, let's say abuse. Okay, so you have a person who's abused, you have a child who is being harmed, and absolutely there has to be some type of way to get that child out of harm's way. Let's take the child from that parent, put the child into foster care, and there we go. That's the end. If the parent doesn't get their act together, doesn't finish these parenting classes, doesn't finish anger management, doesn't do the long checklist of things that we tell them to do, within 1 year, we'll terminate their parental rights. The child will be hopefully adopted, and there we go, case closed. That completely ignores the fact that the whole reason that that parent was even in the point of actually abusing their child, a lot of times, if not all the time, was because they themselves are grappling with forces that are beyond their control. When you look at what this society does to our families, how this society has a history of intentionally separating us from not just from the foster care system, but from the criminal injustice system. I don't like saying justice system.
That's
what was
right.
the war on drugs, what happened with housing segregation, how they intentionally created these ghettos and made sure that Black families couldn't even access loans to be able to invest into their communities. When you have just so many different systems that have been enacted against our people, this is a snowball effect. The result is going to happen. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the context. Like, you're eventually going to have a situation where these social issues that were created are going to boil over. But of course, we've never heard the government willing to go after these issues, willing to remedy these issues that it created. Instead, it treats our reactions to their doings as being the actual issue and tries to tend to it as if it's the parent who's the one who's at fault. But I would say, honestly, for every child that's abused, in most circumstances, the one who should have the finger pointed at them is the government that created those circumstances that led to the abuse.
Whew. So I'm going to come to you in a second. I just want to get the audience in for a second. Brother Colin T. And thank you for this, bro, because I was trying for the life of me to remember this documentary because it did come across my mind as well, but you just given me the name. Parts of the discussion reminds me of the 2018 British film called Farming, story of adopted Nigerian children raised in 1960s London. A lot of that pertains to what I was saying before in terms of the research that was done by those Black social workers. It wasn't a lot of these children. There was because of the what's the word, the indigenous social systems. Yeah, a lot of parents who came over from Africa and the Caribbean to this country used the child the equivalent of child welfare system as the equivalent of the extended family, in a sense, right? Not knowing the nature of the system that they were coming into, if that made sense. And that did a lot of harm, yeah, to a whole generation, yeah, of children who were adopted by these in racist London, in the 1960s, in this country. So yeah, do check that out, family. Very important that we understand and are able to piece together these aspects of the history. If you have a question for Tierny Sheree, please feel free to type it in the chat or come live via the link in the chat. Go ahead, Sister Maud.
Actually, I was going to ask you, Shaka, can you just read that section, the last part of that section when it talks about palpable again, please?
All right. If I drive back the court, all on there.
Yeah, because I have a question around that.
So it says, is the child welfare system built to eradicate poverty or simply make poverty more palpable to American social standards? The answers to these questions are not difficult to uncover.
Yeah, it's interesting because I used to be a parent governor. I think of my son's school, and I think, and one of the things about welfare is there was a big drive at that time to allow parents to, like for the schools to profit off of the back of the children's welfare. Yeah, and I remember being in meetings. I mean, I was, going to be the difficult parent governor, bringing in all sorts of, innovations. But at the same, I remember being in a meeting myself and saying, like, but wouldn't you want these parents to come off of this system? Wouldn't you want to encourage them instead of profiteering? Yeah, because that's basically what they're doing. Yeah, but why I asked about the palpable bit is because I hear stories every now and again. A story will come up in the community, whether it's abroad or whether it's here, where a child, and I hear stories where children are almost being enticed into the care system by their peers. Yeah. True. I hear that a lot. I hear stories like that a lot where the young people are like, well, I get this money and I get that. And I just, and it becomes, and some of these young people, and this is just for them too at the same time, some of these young people don't realize the impact. Yeah. And I think it's important, and maybe you in your wisdom can even state it, like it's really important that young people, they change that mindset. I don't know what goes on around that, and yeah, things could be going on at home or not, but what they're doing, young people get to a stage when they're teens and they want, money is important to them. Yeah. And they're seeing these young people, being rewarded, if you like, for being in the system. Yeah. And so it gives them and then again, going back to things like the school to prison pipeline. It's a setup. Yeah. So I just ask, I suppose I'd like you to maybe expand a little bit more on that, what you talk about when you say palpable, because I definitely get a sense of it, but I'd love to hear your side of what you mean when you say palpable and expand on that.
Well, to respond to the exact situation you were talking about, I do mention in the story of Donnie's brother, who was given the option of basically, do you want to return home to your parents or do you want to go to the foster care system? And the narrative that I created around that, because I don't really know how exactly that conversation happened, but is that, you know, you can go to a nice family, a safe family. You've dealt with so many stressors in your life as a young person. Wouldn't you rather have this middle-class family lifestyle? And I think to a lot of people, that's how it sounds, and that sounds like that's what it's going to be. But in reality of it, the foster care system is no place for a child to have a stable environment, to have, you're not guaranteed a loving family. You're not guaranteed a family that's even going to want to keep you for your entire childhood or however long the state intends to keep you in there. There's no guarantees. And so that's what I would say, if that's the epidemic of children purposely going into the child welfare system to avoid their family issues, you should understand just how unstable that environment is. But particularly pertaining to the palpable quote, well, what I more so meant was that, you know, when you look at how poverty looks today, I think a lot of people, it bothers them when they are engaging with it. And so there's ways that you can subvert the system so that you're not being confronted with it. And child welfare is one of those ways. So we know that poverty is going to create a situation where you're going to have people who are hungry. You're going to have people who can't feed their children. You're going to have children that are hungry, or parents who can't provide. You know, you're going to have all these different issues. So am I going to try to dramatically shift the system so that that poverty doesn't exist? Or am I going to try to create it in a way that it doesn't bother me, that it doesn't upset me, that I can still feel like I'm being charitable? And that's really a lot of the same sentiment towards child welfare. A lot of the verbiage around it was that we're doing something charitable for children. We're going to give them a better lifestyle. We're going to give them opportunities. That's a big thing you always hear. But all of these things obviously come at a cost. But again, the purpose of it is not to undo the oppressive oppressive conditions that exist, but is to make it more palpable to the white supremacist structure.
And I just wanted to add something. I think, and just when you're saying that, it kind of like a bit of a light bulb comes on for me around that, because I think you talked a little bit about what we would call like a nanny state, or, you know, that whole corporate parents, as like we call it over here, you know, when the government is, you know, telling you what to do all the time and kind of overseeing, yeah, your life and your choices. Yeah. And I think again, those things seep into school, going back to that original point about young people, because obviously they're our future. And I get concerned. I mean, we never thought like that in our generation, where where we want, you know, care was an option. I mean, a lot of us didn't like that. You know, a situation might have come up. If a situation in a family came up, then those, like you're saying, that person was given a choice. However, what we hear about is stories where, you know, young people are being enticed, but also when we talk about the corporate parent and the taking of our parental rights, yeah, those two things kind of coincide. You can sort of see the kind of toxic cocktail that comes from that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the problem is we think that the system is going to do right by us, but the system wasn't created to do right by us. The outcomes that we're seeing are what was supposed to be manifested. And so if we treat these outcomes as intended, instead of treating them as happenstance, then we'll be able to quickly identify that the system is not our friend, is not something that is for our betterment, but it's something that is finding ways to control us through dismantling our families.
Sis, your last point kind of relates to the next point raised by one of our audience members. Big up to Teresa Hatchett, by the way. She's going to be featured on Quarantine Convos very soon. As that reminds me, will Brother Jared Ball, we have Brother Jared Ball coming in next month to give us to contribute to a review of the film Judas and the Black Messiah. So really breaking it down, kings and queens. And in fact, earlier today, the brother actually held an interview with the family member of Mark Clark, the other brother, who was assassinated as a result of that onslaught by the Chicago Police Department and the FBI and all these forces. But Sister Teresa says, is the system a doorway to continuously creating a customer with damaging young people who will one day be parents? If we understand this, how can we educate our people to stop the recycling of us? And this is the essential question. I'm going to let you answer now, and I'm probably going to ask something on top of it. So go ahead, sis.
Absolutely. The funny thing is that we don't even think about the fact that a lot of times people who have their children taken by the foster system are a lot of times former foster kids themselves. You always hear that, and repeatedly inside of the history when you're looking through that at one point this parent was a foster child. And so that's what I'm saying. This system is not trying to correct the problem. Clearly, this is someone who was damaged also by the system. But now that they're manifesting the symptoms of having dealt with a traumatic experience at the hands of the government again, the government, what do? They just find ways to put Band-Aids on top of solutions that really need an entire reconstruction of the social system.
Yeah, that last point, I'm gonna have to come back to that last point, because this idea about a reconstruction of the entire social system is a place that most people don't want to go. But let me just draw something out of this here, because in the story of Donnie, you highlighted something that is not surprising, but when you read it, it's still amazing that's something that could actually go on. And it says this, the narrative reads: the worker gave the papers to Rich, who's the father, who stared at the document for a few seconds before signing it. He then handed it to Ethel, mother. It didn't occur to Ethel to read the document or even understand it better before signing. She didn't have much education, and she usually deferred to Rich, not only because he was the authority figure, but also because she felt she lacked the capacity to make decisions on her own. And from what the worker said, signing this document was the first step to reuniting with her children. So she signed it. What Ethel didn't know was that she had signed an entrustment agreement that allowed the state to have custody of her children without making a formal application to a family court judge. Signing this document meant her children were formally a part of the state foster care system. She had unknowingly signed away her right to custody over her own children and had given that authority to the state of Pennsylvania. Just to make people aware, this narrative, all of this is taking place in the early the late 1960s into the early 1970s up into the 80s, and the narrative begins with the assassination of Martin Luther King. All right, in that regard, and events surrounding the assassination of Martin Luther King. My question to you is, how common is this? Like, you just give a parent a document and they end up signing it, but they don't really know what is that a common because we know, like, to me it makes sense that it's common, but when you read it, it still sounds like raw. That's what's really going on.
I'm going to side on the fact that it's probably not as common now as it was before. I've never had a situation where a parent had necessarily signed an entrustment agreement, although there's certainly been circumstances where the parent had gone to the caseworker and asked them, for help, and then they end up inside of a situation, because once you open that door with social services, you really can't know when it's going to close. Right. But so I learned about the entrustment agreement. I was looking back, preparing for the book, I was doing some research from my father's family, and I was able to get some of the documents from when he was in foster care. And when I read that, I'm like, wow, because from when talking to family members, that wasn't her idea at all, that she was actually giving up custody of her children to her. Right. She was just doing what she had to do to get her children back. So unfortunately, because a lot of us have this horrible trusting relationship with the government, when they come to us saying that this is what we're doing for you and this is the way to do it, a lot of us don't have the suspicion of understanding that these people are trying to find ways to connivingly, insert themselves into situations and enforce dominance on our lives.
I'm gonna ask you a survival question before we can get back into some self-determination. Yeah. The reality is that these are the systems that we're currently governed under at the moment. They do impact our lives, yeah, and we are yet to build and create a social welfare system for African people that we need, yeah. And we're going to get to that in a second before the show done. All right. However, coming from a legal perspective and in your experience studying these matters, what areas of recourse are there, yeah, as it stands right now in terms of survival measures for us to remedy these situations?
First and foremost, our people have to organize, and this is, something that I keep emphasizing. If anyone watches my channel, I say it like too much that it annoys myself. But the more and more I realize that
it can never be said too much, sis. It can never be said too much. So say it again.
But the more and more that I realize that that's really the biggest thing that's holding us back, like the more and more I feel like I have to emphasize it. When it comes to protecting your culture, your community, and inserting a right to self-determination, you're going to have a really hard time making that argument when, first of all, there's always going to be a segment of the Black community that doesn't want to be African or doesn't want to separate from the system. And so I'm fine with realizing that and letting that be. But for those of us who do have a real sense that the system will never do right by us, there's an issue of us coming together and building institutions among ourselves so that we can have a proper argument for self-determination. So this is something I would say more so obviously us in the diaspora who are grappling with these racist systems, because a story that or instance that I do talk about is the Red Power movement. It's interesting. You had the Black Power movement that inspired the Red Power movement, but the Red Power movement was able to get things out of it that the Black Power movement didn't. And I think the reason why they were is because they were organized. Because while Native Americans are still grappling with oppressive forces in government, during the Red Power movement, they were able to get a number of laws passed. One is the Indian and Child Welfare Act that literally says in the law, anytime you take a Native American child, you have to do everything you can to place that child with a Native American family. They were able to get this law, although there's a lot of talk, that they're trying to find a way to strike it down and say that it's discriminatory to give Native Americans a privilege. Hopefully they do not strike it down. But you literally have a law saying, anytime you take a Native American child, place them with a Native American family. The law says that Native American parents should have a higher burden of proof to prove that they actually abuse their children. So many protections. And at the same time, we haven't really gotten that type of a result. So it all comes down to organization. That's going to be the number one thing as far as us in the diaspora, really having a strong claim of self-determination, because there's really a strong narrative that Africans just want to integrate into society and they don't want to have their own social systems.
So I like the way you answered the question, because again, as I said at the beginning, most people are going to say we need to lobby around this and lobby the government for that and these kinds of things. Are you suggesting that those acts such as those are going to be more or less futile? And in that context, is there nothing like are there no laws that parents and families can take advantage of right about now that would allow them to at least stave off the more drastic manifestations of the effects of this child welfare system?
There are certainly things that you can do, without organizing on a mass scale. Even I mentioned in a book that in Minnesota, they're trying to push. So African community in Minnesota, they've recognized the horrible disproportionate treatment they receive from social services. So they're trying to get a law passed called, as a kind of like the Indian Child Welfare Act is going to be the African Family Child Welfare Act, I think that's what it's called. That's what it hasn't gotten passed yet, but that's what they're really pushing to get passed. That's going to give them some of the similar of privileges that Native American families have under ICWA. My personal opinion, because funny thing about ICWA, although there's this explicit law saying that you have to do this, a lot of states where Native Americans actually live, the courts are very hostile to ICWA, and they'll find little ways around the law. My argument is that it's not about changing a law. It's not about a reform. It's about having a way to be able to care for yourself, to protect yourself, and understand that we are still in hostile territory until this government has shown that it's willing to no longer be hostile. And there's never been a day that the government has shown that. So yeah, to me, it's not just about, are there things we can do on the political level? Of course, there are things you can do. And like I said, it might make you feel like you're, in a better situation. But if the same result is happening, that is repeatedly happening, of family separation, then you should be questioning if this reform is enough for you, or do you want something that's going to give you a life that is of dignity? I think that's really what it comes down to.
Family, we're speaking to Tierny Sheree, the author of the new book, Fostering False Identity. It's the essential title, The Child Welfare System's Design of Social Control of the Black Family. There's a book by an ancestor by the name of Baba Kobe Kambon, and it's called Cultural Misorientation. And I'm relating the title of this book to that for the reason that in a sense, right, if we understand what the system is, like using a matrix example, the design of the system is to make us agents of it, or potential agents of it. And so the social institutions are designed to suit that purpose, if that makes sense. Not for us to join the resistance. And so false identity essentially is the absorption of ourselves into that system in a myriad of different ways. I've got a question, but I'll hand over to Sister Mo and come back to my question.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, I mean, when you answered the last question, what it brings up for me is the importance and need of some kind of independent mediation that would be culturally competent, because there must be a case for what cultural competency inside of this. And clearly, when you're assimilating, these people are not trained. I don't know how well they're trained. Often they're not trained well. And I just think maybe I don't know if there is, that's coming together. But to me, what comes up immediately is some kind of independent channel inside of our community. Independent representatives like yourselves, but that can, very much inside of a team. But those things, do need to be lobbied. They do need to be addressed, because they're not going to be helpful in the long term for that child and that family. And like you're saying, you have these 12 months, and if you don't do this by this time, and again, it goes back to breaking the family, the destruction of the Black family. It's always been. You all right? Everyone all right there?
Go ahead. And
yes, so and it keeps coming back to that the breakdown, the breakdown of the Black family. It keeps coming back round to how strategic it is, and sometimes it's about interrupting the pattern, and we talk about generational curses as such, and I asked you a question earlier about, what young people can do, but I think this is a kind of conversation which needs to be had amongst maybe young people as well, and their thoughts on that. Maybe just what comes to mind is young people who've come out of the care system, and their conversation for it, or there is there's definitely more dialogue to come, and I'm really glad you've opened up the conversation, because it will open up the conversation for our, for where we live. And I'm sure people will get a lot from what you've said. I think we can certainly relate to it. And I think we need to consider having some kind of international mediation team.
Absolutely. Although I'll say, with cultural competency, when I was a child welfare lawyer, I've had so many trainings on cultural competency. We all are trained very much on that. The problem that we have to confront is that it's not so much there's an understanding, okay, different people have different cultures, okay, don't necessarily be judgmental on their culture. But the problem is when all the standards that are listed for what constitutes child abuse or child neglect are all things that are going to be manifestations of historic racism. So if you're saying, for example, we could say I've seen something, failure to cope. Say something like, oh, not being in the home enough, having too many individuals in the home. Like there's so many different standards that are used. And when you're going with that lens of, we're trying to pacify any resistance to white supremacy, and it's not even necessarily obvious to people who are in the system that that's what the standards are for. But until you completely change what you're looking for, what you're constituting as abuse and neglect, it's not just about cultural competency. It's about just derailing the whole reason why we think child welfare exists. A lot of people think child welfare exists because of abuse to children, and that's one of the most important things that people should take away is that in the United States, 61% of the children who are in foster care are not in there for abuse. They're in there for neglect, meaning things that are related to poverty. Only 12% are in there because of abuse. So,
Right.
Those are the things that I think a major shift. That's what has to happen
in the consciousness.
Sure. And what constitutes as neglect according to one and another, and how they push that narrative. I was watching a documentary the other day about how the housing system, American housing system, destroyed Black families, and how it was the structure of that and placing them there. And then, that whole, it's happening on a modern scale, gentrification, that kind of stuff. And just placing people on top of each other in such a way, that you're going to create poverty, you're going to create disparity. It's a setup in its own right, and there has to be that kind of interruption in that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Family, we are on the cusp of the 50th anniversary of the publishing of a book by the name of How the West Indian Child is Made Educationally Subnormal in the British Education System, written by Bernard Cord. Yeah, for those who are familiar with the Grenada Revolution, you will know the name Bernard Cord, but he used to live in the UK for a while, and he wrote that book, and it was published in March, I believe, of 1971, and so we're approaching the 50th anniversary of the publishing of that book. And I recall, being in around meetings with my father and him explaining that oftentimes social services used to arrive at the houses of our community because they were considering abuse in the context of the fact that older children, for example, had to had to comb their younger brothers and sisters' hair, before they leave to go to school. And so this was considered to be draconian by social services in the 1960s. And so a lot of families ended up having social services intervening in their families because of things like that. And then at the same time, you have the education system that was condemning the children to educationally subnormal schooling because they spoke with an African or a West Indian accent. Yeah, and things like that. And this was considered to be a sign of educational subnormality. I'm outlining that to ask you the question, sis. Is there any relationship between the child welfare system and the education system that you highlight in the book that I haven't got to yet?
I don't spend a whole lot of time on the education system, but there's definitely a correspondence, because the same way that there was a Native American boarding school movement for the specific purpose of assimilation, so same agendas have been achieved or sought to be achieved through public education. Right. Something that I do discuss is how Brown versus the Board of Education, the law that desegregated the school system in America, was basically the open door for all assimilationist or integrationist/assimilationist policy towards African people. And so with this law on the books, now the society opened up. And then what you've seen was a response from the government to utilize these laws in such a way that they would be able to control back then the Negro problem. And so I do think there's definitely an intersection between education and the agenda to indoctrinate the children to make them something as close to white as possible. We should also obviously keep in mind that a major push behind the desegregation from a lot of people who were African was that they felt like putting Black children inside of white schools was a way to integrate them into white society. Similar to that, that's why they pushed a lot of Black children into child welfare, was to try to integrate them into white society.
True. I want to in the story of Donnie, you mentioned one of his older foster children, brothers and sisters, end up on crack. I'm intrigued by the relationship between obviously the crack epidemic and its tool as a destruction of the Black liberation movement. What correlations have you found with that in the sense of the fact that, let me ask it more explicitly, is there evidence, direct evidence of the child welfare system being used as a weapon against the Black Power movement?
Oh yeah, I mean, so it's funny, the ones who actually, so I'm not going to say evidence that it was specifically used against the Black Power movement. We know that it's been used as a way to pacify Black people at certain times in history. And we know certainly that in response to the issues that were created from the government, that there is evidence that the child welfare system was used as a way to try to address those issues. So pertaining to the crack cocaine movement, or not movement, the crack cocaine epidemic, if you look at the time when that was happening, you had the crack epidemic, you had the AIDS epidemic, and then you had Reaganomics, which significantly cut so many social well-being safety net programs. So you have a situation where African people are very much being attacked on every front inside of these environments. And then shortly after, what comes? A child welfare bill that's going to make sure that we're going to get all these kids put into the child welfare system. So all these things are definitely connected. I think it's very important to analyze child welfare while also understanding it as a part of a larger system. This is not the racist system. This is a certain manifestation of the bigger racist system. And all of them come together to collaborate for their joint purpose. And to me, there's just such a no better example of that than seeing how back to back to back to back, from the 1994 crime bill to the TANF social welfare cuts, to right after that, you having the child welfare system laws back to back to back. You know, so many of them in the 90s particularly. That shows you how the system really does collaborate with each other.
Family, we're inside the last 15 minutes. Yeah, last call. You know what I'm saying? And these things. And yeah, I'm just amazed by the conversation, by the book that the sister has written. I'm looking forward to finishing it. Even though she done give at the end already, you know what I'm saying? The spoiler alert, you know. The end but yeah, you know, we give thanks still now, but that is beautiful. That has added another personal element to me that wasn't apparent to me in what I've read so far. I've got one more question, and I'm gonna hand over to Sister Mutta again, and then we'll head towards a close. Sorry, first of all, I want to make the point that when we're dealing with political prisoners and the destruction of the Black Power movement, we have to remember that a lot of these people that were put in prison or were strung out on drugs were parents, yeah. And we all know the story of Tupac, yeah, Shakur, but we forget that he had brothers and sisters, right? You know what I'm saying? And so, and obviously ended up, yeah, wrapped up in the care system at some point in life and them kind of things there. So bear in mind that when we talk, I always hate the narrative that they kill off the leader and the movement dies, because I always find it very false. Like it's never just they shoot Malcolm and leave everybody else to their own devices, right? That's never the case. Yeah. There's always another agenda, and many lesser known people are destroyed, killed, assassinated easily. Right? Just what I'm saying. It's a complete onslaught. It's never just an attack against the leader, right? Yeah. That's never the case. We need to dead that narrative. It's just not. It's false. Yeah. Right. And so when we look into all of this and the idea of COINTELPRO, which is to create mass confusion and disruption in the movement and among the community, yeah, so that they will turn their back on the movement, I don't think we can discount, yeah, social welfare as a part of that agenda, yeah. I don't think we can justify.
And you know, I meant to mention, I'm sorry, that a Black Power organization that was for social workers. The National Association of Black Social Workers were the ones who wrote out a position statement saying that this is cultural genocide. Right. So they came out hard against this agenda to assimilate Black children. And to go back to what I said, I was just specifically talking about the Black Power movement, but I do think that the other movements that were happening around the civil rights movement, you can certainly see the correlation, because at the time of the civil rights movement, there was a lot of rebellions happening. Yes, and the way that the government responded to the rebellions, race riots, whatever, it wasn't just child welfare, but that was certainly a part of it. A way to basically, like I said, pacify the issue. And that's also obviously a big reason why the war on drugs was put into place. That's a big reason why so many different social institutions started to conspire against Black communities, because they couldn't figure out why the Negroes, who were always so good and quiet, are burning down the cities.
Sister Mott?
I don't have another question. I just really want to acknowledge the sister really for, the great works that you've done. I mean, you really have, you've shared so passionately today. And I don't know if you came in at the beginning, but I found an African proverb for you. So I'm going to read it to you and you can tell me what you think of it. But I thought, I think it was fitting, and it's only kind of, I call it law of confirmation. Yeah. So yeah, it's very fitting and it confirms it to me. And the proverb is, one who causes others misfortune also teaches them wisdom. And I just want to really acknowledge you, sis, because it takes some hard work to do what you're doing. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. From one sister to another, trust me, it takes some work what you're doing, and it's brave work. Yeah. So, don't make me fill up now. Yeah. Don't make me fill up. No, I love that kind of look. I'm not. We all have our purpose and we all have our position.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we have to understand that, the position that you've taken, not everybody's going to walk that walk. Not everybody's going to agree with the walk that you've taken. Not everybody's going to agree with what you had to say. But the point is, you took the challenge, you had the courage, and you did it. Yeah. And I'm proud of you, sis, actually, when I say that. Yeah. I'm really proud that you're doing this work, and I want to know how people can get involved. And, and let's all stay in touch, because there's an intervention program needed. Yeah. And you're very much so. And and you're one of the sisters at the forefront, and we have to protect sisters like this, and we have to protect our women. Yeah, so we have to protect sisters like this, not just here but across the globe. Because the work you're doing is really important, and you need the right people and the right vibration around you. So big protection and love to you, sis.
Thank you.
I second that. I third that. What I'm saying, it's magnificent work. And on that point, as we move towards the close here, because relating to some of what we were saying before, getting back to the issue of self-determination and the fact that I appreciate that you've written the book from that perspective. It is extremely difficult, paradoxically difficult in this time of the heightened profile of Black radical movements and organizations, right? It's paradoxical that narratives around self-determination are still very obscure. That with all of the radicalness, the most radical we get ends up being vote Labour, vote Democrat. And at the best, whoever says that might say we've got to push them, but they say that whilst doing very little pushing that can be manifested. Because of the construct, it seems easier for our community at large to comprehend some solutions over others. The most difficult solution to comprehend, unless you've done a lot of work to cultivate this consciousness, is the self-determination argument, is developing our own paradigms, is creating social welfare for African people. So my question to you, Tierney, with this uphill battle that we're fighting and this brilliant book that you've written, how can we encourage, or what methods do we need to employ to encourage our people that this new paradigm, this self-determination, this recreation of our own institutions is the way to go? Those of us who get that are a minority, and we're an under-resourced minority at that. Yeah, and so we need people resources and we need other material resources. It requires us to have to do some conversion. We've got to preach the gospel, yeah, so to speak, of self-determination. And so how do we go about that, my sister?
I think a lot of the elements are starting to resurface. I mean, you see it with the Buy Black movement or Banking Black movement. I think there's really a recognition that if we're going to continue to wait on the white system to stop being oppressive, that we're going to be waiting essentially forever. So the consciousness, I think, is there, but I think it really has to click in our people. Number one, I think African identity is honestly a very important part of this. And that's something that I really did focus on in the book, because you don't have any belief that you can do something separate from the white system if you think that that's basically all that you are. So if we understand that we're a people with a culture, a people with a history and a legacy, then we can from there, I think, have enough sense to say that this system is not representative of our cultural heritage or our being as a people right now. And then I think it's kind of like so many of our greats say, you know, you really have to start with changing the mind. And then from changing the mind, you know, you can really build from there. Again, organizing, I mean, I think we have to really become serious inside of our organizations, not just being in organizations just to be in an organization, but being in an organization that has a very specific purpose and is deliberate and actually following up and doing what it said its purpose is going to be. I think a lot of us get into the mode of just wanting to talk about Black liberation without actually doing Black liberation. You know, the thing I love, as much as I kind of hate all the conversations that happen right now, like you said, with the radical groups who want to talk about the Black Panthers and all that stuff. But the thing I love is that they really do make us call out our inconsistencies as a people, because you can't celebrate the Black Panther Party without also celebrating their willingness to separate and do for self. You can't, you know, that's the most distinguishing factor. That was what the threat was from the government. Like J. Edgar Hoover said, he said, it was that free breakfast program. That's the greatest threat, you know, to America, this fact that they're feeding their own children. So we're having to see that this is what happened before us. We're having to talk about the fact that we do have a capacity to care for ourselves if we're willing to actually go through the steps. And so it's about actually holding our people accountable. I think one issue with certain Black liberation organizations, and I say this humbly because I'm coming into this space, you know, not with a lot of experience myself, but what I've experienced a lot of times is a lot of people who have all the knowledge in the world, all the relationships, all the credentials, but it's just, what are we doing? You know, I think that's what's going to be what actually gets young people, when we're no longer talking, but when we're doing, when we're building, when we're actually having a specific agenda with an overall purpose towards total liberation. So that's my thoughts on that.
Well, my sister, one of my greatest ancestral guides, Baba Amos Wilson, said there's nothing more practical than a good theory, and a good analysis. And I think you've provided one, and I haven't even finished the book, but just what I've read so far, and I love the fact that you end with creating, social welfare for African people is so very important. And so I truly appreciate it. I've got you here, you know, and it's like, because if you don't know Sister Tierny Sheree, she's got a word for a lot of subjects. You have to check out Afrikan Esq TV, because enough things are going on over there, so, and like on anything that's going on in the Black world, Tierney's gonna do a video about it and got something to say.
If I find it, I'll talk about it.
Exactly, you know what I'm saying? It's like that. So we could ask her a million questions right about now. We could ask her about her new vice president. We could ask her about what's it called? The new head of the World Trade Organization. Because we're being included right now, you know, family. Black Lives Matter. Yeah, we're up in the WTO. We're all up in the government of America. We've got people of color fighting to be the London mayor, right? You know what I'm saying right about now. Yeah, so we're getting there. We're improving as a people, kings and queens. Anyway, so yeah, man, I just truly appreciate the work that it is that you're doing, and may your voice, raise higher in this space. It is needed, and there's a lot of strippiness going on, a lot of opportunism going on, and I'm sure you know what I mean. And I think that the sincere voices, the true critical voices need to be out there. And on that subject, we heard it through the grapevine that Sister Tierny Sheree is going to be joining the team at Black Power Media. Is that the case? Can you talk about that right now?
I spoke to Dr. Ball. We're trying to figure out a way that I can collaborate. Not fully joining, but definitely collaborate. It's a very important initiative. So I definitely would be very happy to be a part of it.
Definitely. We look forward to that, my sister. Any last words, Sister Mut?
No, just to say thank you so much. And I'm going to enjoy that you're the read, and I'm glad I'm going to get the book, because it's going to be one of those books to pass down to the children. So thank you.
Most definitely.
In advance.
Sorry. Anything you want to leave the family with, Sister Tierney?
Just saying that we have to understand the gravity of these issues, these systems that put themselves in our communities and tell us that they're here for one reason. They're always here for another reason. And until we become serious about the attacks on our family, it's going to continue the horrible legacy that existed when our ancestors were enslaved. And so I'm hoping, that this book will start a conversation among our people for really organizing specifically to protect our families from the systemic white supremacy that all of us fall victim to.
Most deaf kings and queens. And once again, let me just remind you of the Get Out of Cuba's Way campaign, events taking place over the weekend. And yeah, man, there's more information to be shared. We'll probably have to get into this another day, to be honest. But the link is in the chat, to join that event, and do come through. Get to know what's going on in the world beyond what the mainstream media is saying. We encourage you to do so. Kings and queens, this has been Quarantine Convos with Tierny Sheree, the Afrikan Esq, and her new book, Fostering Forced Identity, the Child Welfare System's Design of Social Control of the Black Family. From what I've read so far, it is brilliant, it is beautiful, it is multifaceted, and most importantly, it is purposeful. It is a purposeful read, Kings and Queens. I look forward to adding it to the Black Classics list alongside people like Nathan and Julia here, and Amos Wilson and Mama Marimba Ani, and these things. And we look forward to Tierny Sheree's novel coming your way soon, Kings and Queens. All right?
Can I just say, sis, how do we get hold of you? How do people get to contact you as well?
Yes, I'm on Twitter, Tierny Sheree. I'm on Instagram, Tierny Sheree, and also Facebook page. And if you want to email me, Afrikan Esq, African with a K, ESQ @gmail.com.
African with a K, Kings and Queens. I just released a video about that.
African with a K. Watch it, actually. Somebody watch later.
Good facts. All right, family. It's been Quarantine Convos. Like the video, share it. Check out gotkushtv.com. Next week for Quarantine Convos, Thursday, the 20th, the Thursday, the 2nd of March. We're going to be joined by Brother Davis J. Williams of the Manhood Academy Global.
4th of March. It's the 4th, right?
Sorry, the 4th. The 4th of March. We're going to be joined by Davis Williams of the Manhood Academy Global. So come through, and always remember, you ain't got nothing if you ain't got kush. Blacktricity, Got Kush TV's exclusive pre-Kwanzaa showcase is now available for you to watch absolutely free. In conjunction with Ghana, the On the Return series, we have brought the African diaspora experience directly to you. To watch this monumental event absolutely free, simply register for membership at gotkushtv.com and you will receive access to Blacktricity as well as more exclusive content, including Reggie Rockstone, Yusufu Jallo, VVN, Malachi Selassie, Daddy Makes Dough, Tods, King Wiz, Tubada, Ras Ashiba, Mama Sia, Brother Leader Bandaka, Israel, Sister Moots, Carla Marie, Yema Yasan Kofa, Goldflow, and a special Voyage to Motherland panel discussion. All this and more, hosted by Nat Nye instead of B. Register now at gotkushtv.com.
The Women of Power Summit, a monumental event dedicated to profiling the work of African women around the world, past, present, and future, featuring Affiong El Affiong, Ronoku Rashidi, the Goddess Neith Knight, Tony Warner, Ari Ma'at, and Celine Ekigwe. To watch the Women of Power Summit, simply register at gotkushtv.com for this and even more exclusive content. Gotkush TV, we put the power in Black media.
Quarantine Convos. Enjoy weekly discussions with people from around the world assisting us in dealing with this normal, mentally, spiritually, and physically. We feature nutritionists, psychologists, therapists, personal trainers, home educators, legal experts, and more, bringing you all the information and inspiration you need. Check out Quarantine Convos every Thursday from 7 p.m. live on Gotkush TV.